Teams that change this much over just one off-season aren't supposed to look this good right away. They're not supposed to start a season 14-5, win 9 straight games, rank top 5 on both sides of the floor, and close games like a seasoned playoff team. But the Toronto Raptors did. And the craziest part, it already looks real. For years, the Raptors could almost do everything except score the ball in the half court. They were elite in transition. They were constantly one of the best defensive teams in the league, and every season they found a way to rebound the ball like crazy. But the moment the game slowed down, everything would fall apart offensively for the Raptors. If you forced Toronto into a slow, grinded out possession game, you'd have a very good chance to go on and win it. And that's been the case for the last 4 seasons. Year after year, the Raptors lived near the bottom of the NBA in half-court offense. Bottom 6 in the NBA each of the past 4 seasons. But this season, that has flipped. The Raptors now have the 5th best half-court offense in the NBA at 103.2 points per 100 possessions. And that is not just a small jump. That's going from a broken identity to a functional, reliable engine basically overnight. The reason that's happened is because Toronto finally has something they've been without since Kawhi Leonard. They finally have a real half-court star once again. And that star is, of course, Brandon Ingram. This is exactly the reason why they brought him in. It wasn't to be a 30 points per game scorer and hijack every possession offensively. It was to give this team a source of stability when the game slows down. He provides this Toronto team with the thing they have been begging for: reliability. Every possession late in the shot clock used to feel like a bit of a dice roll, but now it's controlled. Ingram can get to whatever look he wants to when he needs to. He can walk a defender down in the mid-range, he can punish switches, he can pull up without a ball screen, and he forces help in a way that completely rearranges the geometry of the floor. For Toronto, that's new territory. For the first time in years, slowing the Raptors down isn't a cheat code to beat them anymore. And the ripple effect of that has been massive. Scotty Barnes has been the clear winner from Ingram's arrival, which is hilarious because the moment the trade happened, everybody assumed that these two would not fit. People, and me included, said that because they played the same position, the spacing would be clunky, and it was almost a given that their offense would get worse, not better. But this is exactly why you do not evaluate duos on paper. You've got to roll the ball out on the court and let them play. With Brandon Ingram handling so much of the half-court offense, Scotty suddenly has become the release valve for this team instead of the guy who defenses were loading up on. When teams blitz Ingram, Scotty becomes the wide open outlet. When smaller defenders switch onto Ingram, BI can go straight into his bag and cook. When teams sit in drop coverage, Ingram can walk into rhythm pull-ups. And when they overplay Brandon, Scotty Barnes turns into the secondary playmaker. And don't forget, Ingram is one of the few players in basketball who can access a quality shot from anywhere on the floor without ever really needing a screen. That alone changes everything, and it's a massive reason as to why he's been putting up 21.8 points, 5.9 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and 1.1 steals per game, all on 53% effective field goal shooting. These are certainly not empty numbers. They're the exact profile Toronto hasn't had since the departure of Kawhi Leonard. But the best part is what his presence has unlocked for the rest of the roster, especially Scotty Barnes. Ingram makes Barnes' life so much easier in basically every possible way, and that's why Scotty Barnes is off to his most efficient start to a season he's had yet in his career. If the Raptors were going to take a real step forward this season, it was clear that Scotty Barnes had to fix 2 major things: his 3-point shooting and aggressiveness going to the rim. And the crazy part is, he did both. Last season, he completely abandoned the three-point shot by the end of the year, shooting just 27% from deep, and teams began to treat him like a non-shooter. But this season, he's all the way up to 39% on over 3 attempts a game. And the difference isn't the percentage. It's the fact that defenses actually respect the shot now. That one improvement has changed the entire outlook of what the Raptors can do offensively. Ingram now has more space to operate in, driving lanes are clearer, and defenses cannot send 4 bodies into the paint and just camp out there anymore. Scotty, becoming a credible shooter, has opened up everything for the Raptors and is probably the main reason as to why the Raptors have been so much better offensively. It forces teams to pick their poison, and on most nights, they're choosing the wrong option. And then there's the improved finishing ability. Last season, he was shockingly inefficient in transition, scoring just 1 point per possession, which put him in the bottom third in the NBA. But this season, he's up to 1.3 points per possession in transition, landing himself in the 80th percentile league-wide. And that's exactly where a player of his physical gifts should be. Toronto is still one of the more aggressive transition teams in the NBA, but the difference now is that they're actually capitalizing on more opportunities because Scotty is finishing them. When your biggest, strongest, most versatile player becomes a reliable transition force, your entire offense just becomes more sustainable. It's not just about the fast break points. It's early rim pressure, mismatches, and keeping defenses backpedaling. That's what elite transition players do, even when they're in the half court. And Scotty Barnes finally looks like a real threat. But the improvements don't stop there. As I just mentioned, that rim pressure in the half court is so valuable. Last season, only 22% of his shots came within 3 feet of the hoop. But now, that number's all the way up to 31%. And that's completely changed his scoring profile. He's taking fewer bailout mid-range jumpers, he's attacking downhill more often, and he's embracing contact instead of avoiding it. And when he does get fouled, he's punishing teams for it as well. Because this season, Scotty Barnes is shooting 86% from the free throw line, which is an elite number for a guy of his stature. That really matters. In their most recent win over Indiana, he went 14 of 14 from the free throw line in a 2-point win. Think about that. If Barnes goes 11 of 14, the Raptors lose that game. It's that simple. You can feel the difference in his approach. And now you can literally see the results. It's just obvious that his shot diet has grown up. He's getting inside way more, and he's cutting out those bad jump shots, looks that teams wanted him to take. And because of that, his overall effectiveness is through the roof. This is exactly the version of Scotty Barnes Raptors fans were hoping to see in Year 5, averaging 19.5 points, 7.9 rebounds, 5 assists, and 3 combined steals and blocks per game, doing it all on 55% effective field goal shooting. The box score is finally matching the impact. And when you put this Scotty Barnes next to Brandon Ingram, you suddenly have something that looks like a 2-star foundation. This is the duo Toronto has been trying to build ever since the Larry DeRozan era ended. But the only reason it works as well as it has is because of all of the pieces that fit around these two guys perfectly. The crazy thing about this roster is how they don't have a traditional big three. Instead, they have a collection of talent who fit exactly what it is they're trying to do. Take RJ Barrett, for example, who was playing the best basketball of his life before the injury. He was averaging 19.4 points, 4.8 rebounds, and 3.8 assists on 57% effective field goal shooting. And the value he brought was incredibly simple. He gives them downhill rim pressure in a way that not many on the roster can do. And when you put a driver like that next to 2 playmaking wings, defenses suddenly have to make choices that they don't want to make. Barrett forces defenses to collapse, which opens up the floor for Scotty and Ingram, and he's able to punish teams when they overhelp. He gives the starting lineup a third scorer when needed, and gives the bench unit a stabilizer when the offense begins to bog down. And you really saw just how important he was once he went out. The Raptors' last 2 games without him were 2 of their worst offensive performances of the season. Just 97 points against Indiana, and even in a win over Cleveland, they still needed 37 from Ingram to scrape by, because the team could not buy a bucket from outside, making just 28% from deep. That really tells you everything you need to know about RJ Barrett's value. He's not a superstar by any means, but he fills the role the team needs him to play perfectly. Then you've got Emmanuel Quickley, who finally has started to look like himself once again. Early in the season, it just felt off. The pacing, the confidence, the timing, it clearly wasn't right. But ever since Jakob Poeltl returned to full minutes, Quickley has snapped right back into form and started playing the exact brand of basketball Toronto traded for. He's averaging 16.7 points, 5.1 rebounds, 5.8 assists, and 1.3 steals on 60% effective field goal shooting. And the eye test has really backed up those numbers. Quickley is working in the 2-man game, finding his rhythm from deep, and giving the Raptors real stability in the non-Ingram, non-Scotty minutes. He's under control but never passive, aggressive but not rushed, and this is absolutely the version of him the team needs. He isn't just a spark plug anymore. He's becoming the guard who calms everything down when the game starts to speed up too much. And having that kind of a presence in your starting 5 is a massive reason as to why the group works. And speaking of Jakob Poeltl, he might be one of the most underrated players in the NBA, and certainly on this team. He's the kind of center who does not need touches to change games, but everything he does shows up in the flow of the offense and the rhythm of their defense. You saw that impact perfectly in the Indiana game. Late in crunch time, he had a massive block on what looked like a wide open layup for Pascal Siakam, giving the Raptors the ball back, and you know what happened next. Plays like that don't show up as flashy highlights unless you're watching closely, but that play was the reason Ingram had the opportunity to step up and win the game. Jakob Poeltl gives this team structure, poise, and the defensive identity that they simply don't have without him. And once you move past the core, the depth on this roster has turned into a real advantage too. Jamal Shed has been incredible running the second unit. Mamu gives them a versatile front court spark. Jacoby Walter plays real 2-way minutes, and even Grady Dick has carved out a clean, reliable role. Just a year ago, the Raptors had one of the least productive benches in the NBA, but now they might have one of the deepest rotations in the league. This is where everything finally comes together for Toronto, because the biggest difference between last year's Raptors and this year's Raptors isn't a new star, a new scheme, or some early season hot streak. It's the fact that they have now finally put together a consistent, repeatable identity on both sides of the floor. Last season, so much of Toronto's success depended on chaos, offensive rebounds, transition traps, forcing turnovers, and trying to drag teams into a track meet. That kind of basketball works against certain teams and on certain nights, but it's not something you can build an entire season around. And it's definitely not something you can depend upon in the high pressure moments. But this year, they're running a new system that actually gives them a foundation. Offensively, Brandon Ingram has completely changed the way possessions start. He instantly puts pressure on the defense by getting to his spot, and that allows the Raptors to build a whole offense around something real instead of just hoping that the ball finds a good shot. With Brandon Ingram as the focal point, Scotty Barnes gets to be the true connector, using his strength and underrated playmaking ability to exploit mismatches instead of having to force bad shots with his back against the wall of a shot clock. When you combine those two roles, everything else just falls into line. And that's the big reason the Raptors now have the 6th best offense in basketball at 119.2 points per 100 possessions. For the first time in years, their half-court offense is not a weakness anymore. It's been a proven weapon, 5th best in the NBA. But it's the defensive side of the ball where the leap feels more dramatic. They started the season 1-4 while allowing 128 points per game, and it looked like the system that Coach Darko wanted to run just was not sticking. But since then, they flipped into one of the best defensive systems in the league, ranking 3rd best in the NBA while holding their opponents to just 110.7 points per 100 possessions. That is a monumental turnaround, and the biggest reason is the structure. Instead of relying upon chaotic traps and constant gambles, they're now pressuring the ball with a purpose, rotating as a unit, switching intentionally, and they're mixing in different coverages, like a team that actually understands the plan. Their game against Cleveland felt like the blueprint. They targeted Donovan Mitchell, throwing bodies at him early and often without ever overcommitting, forcing the ball out of his hands, and then quickly scrambling back out to the shooters. Nothing they were doing was overly flashy, but it worked, as Mitchell ended with just 17 points on 30% shooting. That's the kind of identity that travels from game to game. And the best example of just how much better this system is comes in the clutch. Because now that they can score in the half court and get stops consistently, the Raptors are suddenly one of the best clutch teams in the NBA, currently sitting with a clutch time record of 7-2. Nobody predicted that, but you can see it in the way they execute, the way that they trust the offense, the way that they don't panic on defense, and how every player knows exactly what they're supposed to do and when they have to do it. And sure, you can look at their schedule and say, well, they haven't really played any contenders yet. But what this stretch is doing is building their confidence and belief in the system. That kind of a buy-in is way more valuable than people realize. And it's a big reason as to why this version of the Raptors feels dramatically different to what we've seen in previous years. So, the big question is, are they actually legit? It's fair to point out that strength of schedule because it hasn't been very brutal yet, and it's going to matter later. January and February is where things start to get real, because that's when they run into teams like Denver, New York, Orlando, Boston, and Philly. These are the teams that are going to test out what this Toronto Raptors team is really made of. But even with that said, you can't ignore what they've already put on the board. When you're top 5 in offense and top 5 in defense, that's usually reserved for the absolute best teams in basketball. That level of balance just doesn't happen on accident. And the more you look at how they've been winning with structure, discipline, and an actual identity, it becomes harder to just wave it off as just a hot start. The Raptors' success is coming from something real, and that's what makes it really difficult to say that they're not legitimately good. Obviously, there's still a long way to go for this team, and nobody's crowning them contenders in November, but this has been such an encouraging start to the season, probably as good as they could have possibly asked for. And speaking of teams that have proven that they are for real, the Lakers might be the perfect example of how quickly everything can flip once the pieces finally click into place. And if you want to see how the Lakers have turned themselves into one of the most dangerous offenses in the league, then you can check out that full breakdown video right now.